Hi Mandalorian fans, I'm Louise Griffin, I'm the sci-fi and fantasy editor at radiotimes.com.
And I'm David Craig, senior drama writer at radiotimes.com.
And we finally know what's happened in that season 3 finale. It's under our belts, we know what's happened, and safe to say it's a bit divisive.
Well, it's divisive with me certainly, but I understand that you are actually kind of a fan of this episode.
I really liked it. I know a lot of people won't agree. I think a lot of people were expecting lots of twists and turns, lots of shocks, and I'm quite glad we didn't get that. You know, at the end of season 2, we had that Luke Skywalker reveal, and I think people were thinking, how do you top that? And the truth is, in season 3, you can't really, so I'm glad they went a different way with it. I was kind of expecting Lars Mikkelsen to make an appearance as a premature sort of Grand Admiral Thrawn appearance. I'm quite glad we didn't get that reliance on fan service.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, The Mandalorian has definitely been guilty of maybe relying on cameos a bit too much, particularly recently. So I would agree with you that I think it was nice that it was a little bit more narrative focused. I think for me personally, I've become very tired of the sort of premise of the show. It's been so heavily focused on like dogmatic Mandalorian culture and customs this season, and I just don't really care that much. These people just seem horrible, you know, and weird. I just hate to say it, but it's true. So I think that was the thing for me. Obviously, the finale was all about taking back Mandalore, and you know, it was pretty well executed. You know, some nice action in there, but I think for me, I just lacked that investment in the story.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the season as a whole. You know, we've both had our problems with it, I think. For me, it felt like it was, at times, particularly early on, completely dawdling. It felt like there was no real sense of where we were going at all, and I think that was brought back a little bit in the later episodes, but I don't think that's necessarily an excuse. You know, Jon Favreau has very much said that he doesn't know where the show's ultimately going, and I think that could maybe be the problem. So I know how we were talking about earlier with the arcs, how you really need an arc to make it make sense.
Absolutely. I think there were definitely some instances in this season where you could really tell that they were kind of making things up as they went along. So I think 2 really good examples of that is, number 1, how the Darksaber gets passed down from Mando to Bo-Katan on like this weird technicality of some random alien defeated Mando. It definitely just felt like they didn't want to make those 2 characters fight and they had to get out of it somehow. And then also the kind of very random decision by the armorer that Bo-Katan doesn't need to wear a helmet and it's actually fine, which is kind of never really explained either. And it just feels like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni kind of trying desperately to write themselves out of the corners that they've backed themselves into, you know? Yeah,
it did get me wondering what the point of Din Djarin's redemption was if Bo-Katan could just now walk both ways. It was points like that really make you think, well, where is it going? Also, I really liked, I know you feel a bit differently, but I really liked episode 3, the Dr. Pershing story, the Elia Kane story. I thought it was a real standout episode that was really refreshing, maybe because the storytelling was a bit like Andor, which I absolutely loved. But then that just seemed to, we got little references to it later on, but it just seemed to ultimately go nowhere, which I was quite sad about.
That's the thing. Yeah, it was a shame. I thought that episode had potential. I don't really know what the point of it was in the grand scheme of things. I think more generally with the writing this season, I think it's been pretty stilted and wooden. I think, you know, the prequels got so much flack for kind of unnatural dialogue, and The Mandalorian is doing the exact same thing in my opinion. I mean, particularly in that episode with Dr. Pershing, like the way those 2 characters interacted with each other, they never really felt like, I don't know, like actual human beings or friends, or, you know, people who were flirting with each other, or whatever the dynamic was intended to be between those 2 characters. It just never really came across, you know?
He's a scientist. I'll give him some slack for that.
I guess so. But yeah, it's just a shame because I think that the script definitely impacted the performances. You know, I would say that even Pedro Pascal, the internet's favorite person, didn't really impress. I mean, obviously physically it wasn't really him for a lot of it, but even his dubbing I just felt was really like lifeless for a lot of the season.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I know, not to drop you in it, I know you've got your issues with Grogu as well. Should we talk about it?
Okay, fine, you're going to give me some rope to hang myself with, fine. I think Grogu is a novelty character who is completely worn out their welcome, you know? I think it was such a great reveal in season 1. The fact that they'd kept this character a secret was like, it was so amazing, and obviously the merchandise sales were super, super, you know, great because everyone was so obsessed with this guy. But then actually, I think it's just become very apparent that the character, until such time as they do grow up and they can talk and kind of make more conscious decisions and be more independent, there's just nothing left to do with this character, you know? And I was finding he just seemed really shoehorned into a lot of scenes, you know? There was one episode there was a scene between Mando and Greef Karga where they literally cut back to Grogu with every line of dialogue said. It's like, now we've got to see Grogu's little gargly reaction. And it's just like, what is this adding to the show? Like, it was just pointless.
Well, I think, you know, thinking about where the show's going to go in future then, it could be an opportunity for them to focus on something a bit different, on a bit different journey. Because I think for some of us, that final episode felt very final in their story. It was a happy ending. It was a nice ending for them. We now know they're going off to have, you know, more adventures with Grogu as the apprentice. Is that the last of, you know, where we see them? Maybe they'll pop up in future, but maybe we're going to tell a different story now. And I think that could be a big opportunity for, you know, fans like you who are a little bit checked out at this point. Could that bring you back in?
I think potentially, yeah. I think if they are going to retain the title, The Mandalorian, then the show is still going to be a little bit bogged down in the kind of Mandalorian lore and culture, which, as I mentioned before, I'm a little bit tired of. But I think if we could get a really like lively, energetic new character in the mix, then, you know, that could potentially shake things up. And it would also mean that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau don't have to solve the challenge of what Grogu's Mandalorian armor would look like, because I suspect it would look completely bizarre and comical.
It would be so cute. It would be so cute. His little shirt. I love it.
Jeez, and I don't need to see that. But I think also as well, it's really interesting. I've been thinking for a little while that the cloning subplot in The Mandalorian was perhaps leading up to explaining how Palpatine returned. We know he returned somehow, as Poe Dameron famously says. And that was more or less confirmed, I think, with the name drop of Project Necromancer. I find it funny that Dave Filoni is constantly just mopping up the spills from like previous, you know, Star Wars mishaps. Obviously with the Clone Wars, he was fixing a lot of what went wrong in the prequels. Now he's fixing the sequel blunder. But, you know, how do you feel about this announcement that Dave Filoni's going to get his own Star Wars movie? It's going to be the culmination of The Mandalorian and Ahsoka and a lot of his other projects. Yeah,
ultimately I'm excited about it, but I'm also a little bit wary. I think there are a lot of, as we've spoken about, a lot of problems that need to be mopped up by him before it does happen. I just hope that he's, you know, given enough to work with. How do you feel about it? I think I'm mostly excited. I'm landing on excited.
I think I am excited to see what he can do with a bigger budget. Obviously, the Mandalorian budget is substantial, but I think there have been moments, particularly this season, where you've noticed the scale, you know, like there's definitely, you've seen like the limitations of the set and the limitations of what they can do. So if they're doing this big, presumably theatrically released movie, maybe he'll get, you know, $150 million to spend. And with that amount of money, I'd be interested to see what he can do. I worry about it being a little bit inside baseball in terms of like, the continuity of the Filoniverse is pretty niche, it would be fair to say. Obviously, things like the Clone Wars and Rebels and Bad Batch, they have their fans, and that's perfectly valid. But I think would also be fair to say that it's not super mainstream, and there are a lot of Star Wars viewers who haven't seen any of that stuff. And so will the Filoni movie just be complete gibberish to them? You know, I mean, I think that's a big risk.
It is a possibility. Before that, though, we've got Ahsoka to look forward to. We're going to be rewatching this last episode to, you know, see what we think of it. Maybe we'll be a bit kinder with fresh eyes. Maybe not. Let us know what you thought of the finale of The Mandalorian Season 3, and check out radiotimes.com for all the coverage you need.
Bye for now.
Bye.